Hola, bienvenidas. Hi, welcome everyone. Nowadays, radio streamers are the most avant-garde music curators of our generation, and also they are generating a vital network with social impact. Today, we are here with the founders of our referent radio stations to analyze this phenomenon. Guiding this conversation, Marta Salicru from Radio Primavera Sound, our director. Kikelomo Oludemi from Oroko Radio, and Femi Adeyemi from NTS. And online, if they can connect now, they can connect? Well, there will be, here, hi, this is Joseph and Elias Anastas from Radio Alara. So the conversation is yours. Thank you so much for being here.
So thanks, Aida, for the introduction. As Aida said, my name is Marta Salicru. I'm not the founder of Radio Primavera Sound, but I am its director. I define myself professionally as a music journalist, but in 2019, Primavera Sound approached me to front this project, Radio Primavera Sound, which at that time was a project for a streaming radio that had started to air 4 months before. 3 years from them, though, RPS has thrived, we can say that, reaching audiences that we didn't expect, more than 10 million plays in the first quarter of this year, of 2022, but, spoiler alert, we didn't make it through streaming radio. So that is why when Aida, my colleagues at Primavera Pro, asked me to moderate this talk and to have the chance to share a conversation with these people who are leading such inspiring radio projects as NTS, Oroko Radio, and Radio Alara, well, I felt a bit of an imposter, because we are here to talk about how these people have built strong music communities through streaming radio, while we at Radio Primavera Sound, we do have built a strong community, indeed, but neither through streaming nor a particularly musical one, but we will arrive to that. Let me please introduce my co-speakers. I have the honor to share this talk with. Here with me at this Primavera Pro's main venue at CCCB in the center of Barcelona, we have Femi Adeyemi, who founded NTS in London in 2011. He was disenchanted with commercial radio and, inspired by pirate radio and university radio stations, founded NTS. Since then, this radio, which stands for Nuts to Soup, maybe you could later.
I'll explain that.
Okay. It has become a global platform for music discovery, with permanent studios in London, Manchester, Los Angeles, and Shanghai, and the inspiration for all internet radio stations that have followed, including, of course, Radio Primavera Sound. You can listen to it at www.nts Live. Femi, welcome to Primavera Pro, to Barcelona.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Also, we have Kikelomo Oludemi, DJ based in Berlin of British and Nigerian origins, co-founder of Oroko Radio, a non-profit community radio station in Accra, the effervescent capital of Ghana. Didn't know about it, but Kike has already told me. Oroko Radio is a name that stands for a Yoruba pre-colonial messaging system to communicate, which is a very good choice for a radio. And it's the youngest of the projects represented today. It was launched as a streaming platform to bring together African diasporic voices in January 2022. Kike, welcome to Barcelona, to Primavera Pro.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. Thanks
you
for
can listen to Oroko Radio in oroko.live. And attending online from New York, we have Elias and Yusuf Anastas, co-founders of Radio Alara, a streaming radio network based in Bethlehem, Ramallah, and Amman, born during the global confinement of 2020. Alara means the neighborhood, and Radio Alara is an online musical agora, a public space that hosts DJ sets and talk shows, proud of bringing down the boundaries between producers and listeners. You maybe could after talk us about it. And also in 2021, Radio Alara led what was called the Sonic Liberation Front, a media blackout as a protest of the eviction of families in the occupied Palestine and the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. Elias and Yusuf, thanks so much for attending, and you can listen to Radio Alara in www.radioalara.net. Okay, so to start with, I would like you to briefly introduce your projects, if it's possible, in 5 minutes each, so we have later some time to chat a little bit. Femi, just a battery of little questions, and you answer if you want.
Sure.
What did you set up NTS in 2011? What did you want it to be? A local internet radio station. And what has become global musical platform, not bad.
Yeah.
Why the heck did you call it NTS, which stands for Nuts to Soup?
Okay, cool. So NTS was started in 2011. I mean, there's a number of reasons. It was mainly from the frustration of having to listen to the same music over and over again on traditional radio formats. I also felt like there was a sort of like underrepresentation of people like myself in radio who had a general wider taste in music. Luckily, I was surrounded by similar-minded people in London, and after myself trying to get on radio but not being able to get on radio, I was just like, all right, well, I might as well just try and set something up myself. There was a sort of quiet confidence because the community around me, I knew the people around me had enough of the sort of the taste and the knowledge to be able to, if we came together, we would be able to create something special. So, reached out to a bunch of friends who are sort of in the London sort of underground music scene. Contacted them, told them I'm going to try out this thing. Started it. It was at the back of my mind, it was going to be it was going to be something I was doing part-time, because I was like, this is, I had a rough idea of how it would work as a business, but then it is music, it was always going to be complicated. But I was like, I've got this space, I'm going to set up a studio, let's just broadcast from there. 2 to 3 months into it, I initially put a few posters around London. I was expecting roughly about 20 people to get in touch. We ended up having like 60 to 100 people get in touch. So it was a sign for me there was a huge demand for like something different, basically. So, and then 2 to 3 months into this, I was like, okay, cool. This can't just be a side project anymore. This is a real thing. And it kind of took off from there. And since then, we've been going for 11 years now. And like you said, we've got physical studios around the world. We have over 600 hosts, DJs on the station from different parts of the world. And yeah, it just continues to grow from strength to strength every year. In regards to your other question, why I called it Nuts to Soup, I mean, it's a question everyone asks. To be honest, I'd say NTS, you can make it mean whatever you want. It doesn't have to be Nuts to Soup. But it comes from I used to write, but before the radio started, I used to have a blog I used to write about music on my own little blog called NTS, called Nuts to Soup, which comes from, it's an old American saying, soup to nuts, but I just flipped it on its head. Soup to nuts means from the beginning to the end, means everything. So I just kind of flipped it and used it. I also took a reference from The Simpsons, because I'm a huge Simpsons fan. So it's like, that's where the name comes from, basically.
But it makes sense. I mean, like being a radio where everything's
covered.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, exactly. It's basically linked to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that we have a video, so
yes.
we can get a taste of the soup.
Yeah. So you can, there's a little video you can show to everyone.
I've never heard of NTS. How do you convince me to listen to it?
So I'm trying to convince you to listen to NTS.
Yes.
It's easy.
This is the ultimate flagship pioneer.
Genuine community.
Home of good music.
It's a way of life.
Real diehard music fans.
Ultimate creative freedom. People locked in worldwide.
When
NTS came along, it really kickstarted the whole movement within London.
You know, again, you'll always mix it up with some of the up-and-coming presenters, so people who are lesser known, and then maybe you'll have someone that's a bit more established, like Mount Kimby,
Richie Sakamoto,
Military.
and so then, you know, it's like this is our platform to show off all these sort of emerging DJs and presenters.
Asking where NTS is going to go is like asking where you think like underground music is going to go.
People want to live in the real world more, and radio is the perfect soundtrack for that.
Having someone you can trust present something to you, I think is more valuable than ever. And as the algorithm takes over, it's just nice to have a human touch, and I think NTS is that.
NTS isn't about a trend. NTS is about longevity, about building a community, supporting a scene.
NTS is beyond a platform, it's culture. It produces subculture. It's more than just radio or just a music platform. There's so much involved and there's so much more to come.
They're kind of making their own rule book.
Okay, so Kikelomo Oludemi from Oroko Radio. I think that we have already a presentation. Maybe you could already present it, and I'm gonna again also make some questions. To begin with, and why did you set up the Oroko Radio last January? And if was creating a platform for African voices in the diaspora as you are the main goal? Why in Accra? What is happening in Accra now? And why did you call it Oroko, which is a pre-colonial Yoruba communication system?
Cool. Maybe we can put up the presentation. I can chat along to it and answer the questions because I think some of the answers are also in there. But yeah, Oroko Radio was founded. Actually, the idea was born around February of last year, and we just started broadcasting of January last year. I'm one of 4 original co-founders. The other co-founders are Nico Adamako, who's a German Ghanaian, also based between Berlin and Accra. There's Naomi Ada, who's also based between Berlin and Accra, and there's Trise, who's based in Accra. He's not so involved in the project anymore. But we have also now a really big team. Like, we've expanded our kind of core team, who are doing everything from social media content to written content. The 4 of the original co-founders, we met in Accra last year, and I think all of us had this separate connection to the culture that is thriving in Accra, musically, sonically, but also visually, with the performance arts as well. For myself, I have a very personal connection to radio. I think that was one of the very first things I ever wanted to do when I was a child. Also kind of growing up in and around London, where radio culture is really, really rife. It really shapes the culture. And just going to Accra and seeing the presence that's there, but also kind of like having this dual identity as both an African and a European. I was just blown away by this side of me that hasn't really been that hasn't really flourished yet, or not flourished, but I haven't really had the opportunity to thrive. So maybe I can go to the next slide, please. So ultimately, we wanted to set up this platform that not only brought together the voices coming from the African diaspora around the world, but also creating a platform for voices specifically on the continent and building bridges across the music and local communities across Africa as well. So we have a certain kind of like quota that we look for when it comes to some of the residents. We have residents all around the world. We actually have a resident here based in Barcelona. Shout out to Sofkeos, Teresa. But we have them residents in America, in Colombia, in Australia, across Europe, across Africa, in Uganda, in Kenya, and we wanted to create this platform for these voices to be heard. There's multiple reasons why this was necessary, but also to kind of like build stronger bridges. Even if you look at some of the conversations that are happening across the continent, there weren't so many collaborations, or even like the platforms for collaboration, and also just looking at the role that radio plays in forming culture and providing these spaces for me as a DJ, I wouldn't be anywhere without radio. My first opportunities to learn and even practice DJing came through some of my radio residencies in Berlin and in London. The first place where I learned and met like-minded individuals as well, who were all into the kind of like similar types of culture, even if it wasn't the same sound. I got my first DJ gig through a radio station. I built my network through radio. I mean, today, like I'm very, very passionate about radio, and I think it's a similar story for both Nico and Naomi as well. She had a very strong connection with performance and visual arts, and that kind of that also kind of inspired us to come together and bring everything together. And so we have a whole bunch of objectives. If you could go to the next slide, please. So we really wanted to build this community that enriches on a global level. But one of the things that was important for us is that the voices that come on Oroko Radio through their own words. There's a lot of perception of what Africa is. Even for me, I consider myself quote unquote woke. I spend a lot of time going in Africa. I'm not like one of the diasporans who just goes once and is like, whoa, Africa. But I've been there. You know, I was raised equally Nigerian as I was as British, and you see that a lot of the narrative that is shaped around what Africa is as a continent is so twisted and so one-sided and so honestly cringy. So we wanted to create this platform to showcase what's going on in a non-exploitative way and allow our residents to be heard in their own words. So we don't have any limitations for what people can talk about. There's shows on toxic African parenting, on dating in the diaspora, on alternative sounds. There's someone who has Afro folk music show, alternative punk, rock, techno, talk shows, soundscapes. It's just a platform for people to showcase alternative sounds. We wanted to build relationships with like-minded projects around the globe. So we have really good relationships with one of our residents, for example, based in Kenya, Santori Signal, who's got a similar kind of like music program going on there, and also just all around the world. And we also wanted to use our platform to prompt important conversations to some social problems as well, and also provide the springboard for people who are doing their thing in the continent, but particularly in Ghana. We have a quota of at least 50% of our residents have to come from Ghana and be based locally. And so, I think also one of the other things that we had in mind is that the music industry in the continent, the mainstream sound is traditionally Afrobeats, now Amapiano, coming from South Africa as well. And there's so much other sounds coming out, and Africa has it's so much richer than what it's known for in those perspectives. So we wanted to provide a platform for all of our friends, our community, who are kind of doing things around there to kind of like showcase the sound as well. I think you can go to the next slide, please. I guess one of the reasons, as I mentioned, radio just plays such a big role in innovation. If you think about pirate radio culture, as Femi mentioned earlier, it just provides these physical spaces to connect with like-minded individuals. You see radio stations popping up all around the world, in Europe and Asia and North America, and they just provide this ability to connect. Even for me as a DJ, when I travel, the first thing I do is, okay, what radio station is there? I went to Korea, went to see Seoul Community Radio. When I went to LA, I went to NTS LA, did a guest set there, and it just also a lot of my friends have come through that. And so knowing what is happening in Accra and what's happening at this particular time, the time is exactly right to bring all of these people together, from those based in Ghana, those based in Africa, and those based with African roots, and not necessarily always just African roots, but pushing this togetherness of the diaspora to bring them together in this one place, and also to try and provide the space that is an alternative route for African labels. I think we can actually just leave it there in terms of the presentation. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. And then Oroko, the name, we wanted to have something that had a really true West African touch, also because before the colonial powers came to West Africa and all of these borders were kind of put in between Ghana, Nigeria, Togo, Benin, it was actually quite fluid in terms of tribal movement. So it was important for us to have something that reflected something that came from pre-colonial times, and it seemed pretty fitting to have something that is connected to communication, but also non-verbal communication. So you could send someone, for example, a comb from tribe to tribe. It would mean like, I'm breaking up with you, kind of thing. And like having something that has an alternative meaning from what is perceived to be by Western perspectives, that was also very important to us. So yeah, that's Oroko in a nutshell.
Thank you, Kike. So now we have Elias and Yusuf Anastas from Radio Alara, which also has a meaningful name. Alara means the neighborhood. I'd like to ask when we can recover, please, Elias and Yusuf on the screen. I'd like to ask you who are these neighbors that you mentioned in the name of the radio. A radio that was created to fight boredom during lockdown, if I'm not mistaken, but that in 2021 became really political as a protest against the oppression of Palestinians by the state of Israel. I don't know if Radio Alara was meant to be that political from the beginning. And also a very interesting thing about the project is that they aim to put no boundaries between producers and listeners. And well, I think that you have managed a very interesting way to do that. Elias, Yusuf, hello. We have missed the sound now.
Yeah. Good morning.
Morning.
It's great to be here. Thank you. And it's super inspiring to hear about other projects. So basically, Radio Hub March 20. In the moment where the lockdown started very quickly, different parts of Palestine and Jordan. And we basically accidentally found out that the website was launched from the Beirut, bringing together a certain number of people in one common place. And we were just super curious to understand how this mechanism would work online, how we create a radio as part of a family of other radios in the Middle East. And it really started very organically. We started inviting some of our friends who started sharing their music, and these friends started inviting other friends. So it really started in a very communal, organic way. And for us, it was what it means to be the cultural center in our times and conditions, especially in the pandemic and with the opportunities to produce collectively and communally.
Yeah, I think the radio wasn't aimed at an objective that was predefined or preconceived. The radio has evolved its surroundings, and that's when the notion of neighborhood comes in. The neighborhood of the radio is not something static. It's not related to a geographic people. It's the radio of the neighborhood, the scale of the community. So the community defines what the neighborhood is. The neighborhood reacts to surrounding, whether in Colombia or in China, in Japan, anywhere in the world where it's present. The radio reacts to its environment. So the radio, you said the radio became very political. The radio wasn't an aim for the radio to be political. It was more an aim for the radio to react to its immediate environment, to bring different residents of the radio to interact with each other beyond space, basically. And so there's an it's linked to the chat. The chat is auxiliary to the radio, and the important part that we try to use as a medium of connecting limits between the producers and the listeners. So basically, the producers on the radio are also the ones that interact with the chat, are the same person.
Sorry that I interrupt you, but I'm having trouble to following. I mean, because of sound trouble. I don't know if maybe it would help with the presentation.
Yeah.
If we can see the presentation while Elias and Yusuf are speaking.
Yeah, maybe we'll try to comment very quickly the presentation. this is an image in Belgium, the first day of the lockdown, where actually a certain number of people were staying in that hotel, and they found out that a number of them were infected by it. And this image was for us quite powerful because from a very health specific condition, it turned into something that is very militarized. And so basically, we found ourselves curfew in a very quick way. And basically, the radio response to fill in the fact that we didn't have access to public space. So for us, the radio became the neighborhood, trying to replace what the public space does in the city, and how we can create a communal public space virtually online. Can we see the next slide, please? So this is essentially the platform that was started in Beirut that tried to bring together a number of radios that we joined very quickly. And we look at next slide, where we started. This was the initial slogan of the radio, which means from the living room to the kitchen and vice versa, which is basically was a very important slogan for the radio because it showed that basically everyone was in the same conditions of the pandemic, and the fact that we were all stuck at home, we used the virtual public space of the radios to come together and collectively think about how we can produce together. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So very quickly, we started to have like a daily structure on how the radio would operate, where every morning at 11 in the morning we had like a cooking show. In the afternoon we had a podcast about political spaces and architecture, and so basically these anchor shows created this kind of a rhythm that brought together music and sonic content with as well cultural initiatives. And for us, it was really important to put them both on the same level and try to intervene in virtually in the framework of the radio to create diversity in the program. And we are trying to show these slides because the visual identity of the radio was really important as well for the radio to start and to emanate, and use the social media outlets in order to create this kind of presence. And gradually, because it's a communal radio, we started to think about how this visual identity should as well dissolve, and basically the community takes over, whether through the submission of visuals or through the suggestion on the way the radio appears to the public. So next slide, please. Next slide. So as you can see, gradually the visual identity of the radio started to be reduced. The logo started to defragment. We can go to next slide. The ellipse that had the initials of the radio lost its letters and became only a generic ellipse. Next slide. And then we started to have a certain number of monthly programs, monthly takeovers, that as well helped us to reach out to a wider community in other parts of the world. So we had a partnership with the nightclub in Beirut, Ballroom Blitz, that created a very important diversity, and Recordat and Asas, two other takeovers that we had as anchor takeovers within the radio. Next slide. So gradually the program of the radio started to be very diverse, and we started to think about how we announce the daily posts. And so basically we started to decline the visual identity into different graphic elements on a daily basis that would announce the program of the day. And we are showing these to let you understand how even this format of visual identity as well with time dissolved, and we posted an announcement that we can see on the next slide, where we were inviting all the residents of the radio to start to contribute image-based contributions that would serve the announcement of the programs on a daily basis. And the only requirement was to have the ellipse component as part of the submissions. Next slide. So this is examples of the different submissions that we started to receive from the community of the radio that reflected on the initial visual identity, but as well opened up a kind of platform of exchange of visual content and drawings. Next slide. So gradually, this is the diversity, the visual diversity of how the radio evolved very quickly. And for us, it was important as well to have, this image is very important for us because it really shows the multifaceted aspect of the radio, bringing really people from diverse backgrounds, whether people that are DJs or sound artists, graphic designers, researchers, chefs. So it's really a radio that is essentially about music, but as well it brings in people from various and different backgrounds. Next slide. So in July 2020, Israel, backed by the USA, decided unilaterally to annex lands that are around the West Bank. So lands that were currently identified as settlements. And this action was totally against international law. And as we had this platform that brought together a certain number of listeners per day and a certain number of contributors, we thought that we have to react and we have to find a way, a creative way that is linked to culture to protest this illegal annexation plan. Next slide, please. So we basically decided to launch an online protest that would bring together a certain number of sound artists and DJs that would contribute sonic content, protesting the passage, contesting actually the annexation of Palestinian lands. So we had I think 84 DJs that played over a period of 4 days. It was a lineup of 84 hours. And for us, it was really important because it came out from the specificities of the political conditions that we live in Palestine, but reaching out to other parts of the world. And basically, it opened up opportunities to mirror forms of struggles and oppressions that are found in other locations of the world, whether in Colombia or in Chile or other parts of the world. So this kind of moment of solidarity where communities come together to fight systems of oppression. Next slide. So yeah, I think the political aspect of the radio that you mentioned at the beginning is not something that was designed or an objective that we wanted to reach, but it's basically the flexibility that the radio obtained since its inception, where it adapts to different situations. It has the ability to transform it and to evolve based on specific conditions. And the struggle that we live in Palestine and the struggles that we find actually in other parts of the world is something that we need to find new ways to talk about these struggles. And the independence of the radio and the autonomy of this space was something very important for us, and to try to experiment what are the new channels of togetherness and solidarity that can be experimented through music and sonic content. Next slide.
Elias and Yusuf, excuse me. I don't know if I may ask you to maybe we can move to the next so we are.
Yes, I mean.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean we can wrap up. I mean for us it's just the idea to say that the radio very quickly evolved into this very large community, and for us the Radio Alara has been founded by a group of friends, but for us the radio is the radio of the community, and the way it's shaped on a daily basis, the way the identity of the radio evolves on a daily basis is through its community. And it's, for us, the radio is composed of this culturally diverse project that is materialized by the cultural identity of its residents. Thank you.
Okay, so briefly I'll talk a little bit about Radio Primavera Sound, which, as the name, our name is not as creative as yours. It's just meaning that we are the official radio of Primavera Sound Festival. But the funny thing is that in the end, as I was saying before, our star contents are not based on talk, on music, but are based on talk. We have, in fact, plenty of music content, but incorporating the musical diversity of the festival, but it's not the most popular. We were born as an online radio station, streaming-based, but we have evolved into a podcast producer with content based on music, but also on culture, humor, journalism, with an emphasis on feminism and LGBT issues. So, as I was saying before, it is through podcasting and not streaming how we have built a community, and also through social media, and maybe to, as we were saying, to visualize what Radio Primavera Sound is, if we could see a little video, and then we already move to talk a little bit all together. So please enter video.
Oye, ¿cómo ves esto? ¿Crees que es buena zona?
Sí, él no se va a quejar de las vistas,
pues venga,
tío.
Vamos a por ello.
Que empiece Tardeo. Una cosa, ¿eso qué es un podcast?
Os voy a presentar 5 de las noticias que creemos que han sido insuficientemente tratadas por la mayoría de los medios este año.
Quiero desde aquí avisar a mis padres que no escuchen el podcast de hoy.
Aquest podcast el fem 3 persones. Oye, Polo i l'edició. Les xavales.
No hi ha el Guillem Gisbert avui aquí.
No, clar.
Un programa que fem a Ràdio Primavera Sound.
Sin parar, sin parar.
Bon dia, bona tarda, bona nit.
Azafata, dígame, señor Osborne.
I'm gonna think out loud. You know what happens when I know.
Buscava l'aprovació de la professió, del públic, del meu pare.
Aquí hemos venido a jugar.
Si no me dedicara a la escritura, me armaría eso.
Vinga, va, avui cuinem una truita. La truita ha caigut al terra.
Todas sabemos exactamente que algo está pasando. O sea, muy bonito.
Claro. Este tío está muerto.
A mí me generó un periodo de mucho miedo.
Pues yo creo que es que nosotros disfrutamos viendo sangre.
Sangre cinematográfica.
Para un robot esto es muy difícil de comprender, pero yo al menos os respeto.
Y mi noticia favorita del año ha sucedido en Grecia.
Básicamente, deja la iglesia, se casa con una psicóloga, escritora de temática erótico-satánica.
Sí. Dime que no estamos viviendo el principio de Jurassic Park.
¡Wow, chaval! ¡Ay, uy, sí! ¡No! Hay que hacerle un exorcismo porque esa persona no le está regando bien el hipotálamo.
Ai, pues mira, jo lo veo al revés.
Vaig respirar fons i vaig fer el que vaig poder, ¿no?
Bueno, dale, Lucía, cállate.
Muchísimas gracias por dedicarnos vuestro tiempo.
Bueno, yo lo recordaré siempre.
Okay, so honoring the name of the talk, how have you built your community? So kind of a bit of practical instructions on how to build this strong streaming radio community in your cases.
I think in regards to NTS, we've been going for 11 years now. When NTS was at the start of before NTS started, there was when there was a sort of decision whether to go down the sort of pirate radio model way or look at the internet to do things in a lot more safer way. When I decided to sort of go down the internet, I started looking at other internet radio stations. And I think the one thing that really stood out to me was that a lot of internet radio stations were based in a lot of like individual private projects. People were using the technology of the internet to be able to do stuff remotely. But I think after looking at that and just realized that actually what was missing with that was the gathering of people together. And I don't think, as amazing as the internet is and as terrible as it is in its own way, the one thing it can't recreate is having people together in the same space. So the key thing for me when starting NTS was to find the space where people can actually come together. again, it was such a diverse group of people, and it was really, and London is quite a diverse city, but still people don't always, because the people into different scenes or different types of music, you might not meet someone from a different world. What we were trying to do was to have all these different people from different worlds be able to sort of, connect, basically, for want of a better term. So it was, you have someone who comes in who does a metal show on the station, next followed by someone who does a jazz show, both meeting for the first time and realizing that, I've never actually listened to this kind of music before, and then opening them up to a bunch of stuff. And that's how we sort of try to foster that community and build on it from there, the whole idea is, if there's people, we can do this in London, then we can definitely do this on a much global level as well. And so I think at its core, that physical space, the studio, is how we were we want to foster, this is how we foster our community.
Yeah, I really just have to echo what Femi said about the physicality of a space. Oroko doesn't have a studio at the moment. We have the studio space now at the skate park in Accra, Freedom Skate Park, where we work really closely with, and we're in the process of building the studio. But one of the questions we had is, how do we build a community without this physical space? But what we did is really focus on a lot of our physical activation. So we've hosted a whole bunch of workshops. I was teaching DJ workshops across Accra, specifically for women. We've hosted music production workshops together with partners like Native Instruments and Pioneer DJ. We've hosted a whole bunch of physical events and spaces and showcases where our residents can play, radio pop-ups at a lot of community spaces in Accra, just to really galvanize our community and have them physically together. Obviously, with such a global community as well, we have residents in about 5 continents, I think coming up to about 25 countries. One of the bigger questions also is, how do we bring that sense of community to people who can't physically be there in Accra? So we use platforms like Discord to prompt conversations, have collaborations. We've had some of our residents do remixes for other residents in different countries and continents. We involve our residents in a lot of the conversations and decisions that we make. For example, naming of the guest mix segment of our shows, having open application rounds as well, involving our residents in the station running, and also for us as a not-for-profit station, we really heavily rely both on donations to fund ourselves, but also the volunteering aspect from our residents. So we kind of have this you give and you get element. So for example, we managed to galvanize some of the equipment from some of our supporters like Pioneer DJ and Native Instruments, and we put them in a physical space in Accra, even though we don't have our own physical space. And we say, if you're a resident, you have these privileges where you can go and use this DJ equipment to practice, this music production equipment to practice, and then you get something back as well as your contribution to the radio station and volunteering to help sustain the station. So I think this element of physicality is crucial, to be honest. For me, especially after the pandemic, I'm over Zooms and meeting people online and just being able to physically meet people. Even now, as I say, being able to connect with residents all around the world as we travel is crucial, but also having these platforms where people can converse with each other, can connect with each other online, even if they're not in the same physical space, also really complements that very well.
It's also key for us, for RPS, this physical element, because on the DNA of the project was this idea of doing radio shows in front of an audience. Before the pandemic, we even had our own little venue, and we do radio shows there, an after work. Of course, during the pandemic, we need to stop that, but this year has been the return to that idea, and we are hosting radio shows, not like events, club events, as you have seen. There's lots of talk in our in our model, but yes, I mean hosting events where people comes to see how we do an episode of the podcast live and in different venues of the city and in different festivals, and people are asking us to come to bring our shows to places. Yeah. And what about you, Yusuf and Elias with Radio Alara? How did you build your community?
Basically, the radio was created during the global lockdown, and at that time we were actually looking for a space that would replace public space. So public space, by definition, is the space where you have people coming from everywhere in a kind of a free way. So we tried to reproduce that scheme with the radio by basically, even in the way the radio was running, in the beginning we had practically no selections. So basically anyone could drop a set, drop a talk show, drop anything, drop a file on a link, and we would program it on the radio in the exact same way a public space works. So the idea was to create the community around the public space and around the public gathering of people around the space that is basically a virtual space, and the space would exist also with the chat. So people were also giving in between each others, they were giving themselves appointments on the chat. So we would meet at 6 p.m. on the chat of Radio Alara, and it became a sort of a space. The chat became a sort of a space, and it also gave as in a public space, because the public space is really an important part of it, because the public space is somehow public, so it's not intimidating. Everybody goes to a public space. You use the public space in a way that is very you consume the public space. You use it in very different and very public ways without being intimidated. So many people that were playing on the radio, part of the community of the radio, weren't maybe initially involved in music or had just a nice taste in music, but never performed, never played in a public way. So I would say that the chat and seeing the radio as a public space has broken some limits and brought some publicness to the radio that reduced the intimidation of being of performing, and thus bringing a community together that is wider and wider. And in our region of the world, it makes maybe even more sense. I mean, compared to you guys, where the physical space is very important, I think for everyone the physical space is really important, because that's where you meet physically and where you make things happen in a more physical way. But in our part of the world, the absence of physical space, but the consideration of a public space, brought together some people that would never meet in real life because of political situations that we have specifically in our part of the world, but also because that Palestine is a very controlled area. So it's very difficult for anyone to come to Palestine, because it's the borders are all very well controlled, they're very well hermetic. But beyond that, I mean, beyond the politics of it, it created a sort of a community so people became friends on the radio without ever meeting in real. So I think the publicness of it created the community.
Maybe if I could just also add one more point. I think it's really important to look at this notion of competition versus collaboration. Mm-hmm. It's something I've definitely experienced, particularly as a woman DJing, where the people like to, she's also a DJ, she's your competition, and this mindset where you can't, I don't really understand where it comes from, to be honest. And sometimes you see it also kind of in broadcasting, and I think something that's worked really well for Oroko is going for collaboration. Instead of seeing other radio stations as competition, we work together. We've had already really amazing joint broadcasting streamings with Berlin-based stations like Refuge Worldwide and Kashmir Radio, and we're also in talks with radio stations all around the world to do crossovers, to do takeovers, where we did one with Radio 8000 in Munich as well, where some of their residents were streaming on our platform and vice versa. And it just means that we can connect with communities and build communities and have this crossover in different parts of the world that may not have heard what we're doing. And I think this is a mindset that works really well for community radio stations, just to collaborate with like-minded platforms and individuals, as opposed to seeing them as they're the ops. We have to make sure that they're not taking our listeners. Or we could just work together and see what happens, and when two communities come together and grow together as well.
You were asking where this idea of competition comes from. It comes from the patriarchy, of course. So, yeah. And also, one thing that all these your projects, not ours, that much, that has in common is in the music selection is a will of doing this eclectic mixes. And also, it was mentioned on your video, and also it's something that I think you have spoken a lot in interviews, that this idea of wanting to offer an alternative to the algorithm-based.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, which is why I've always been baffled by. I mean, I understand why most radio stations play the same kind of. I get there's advertising money and all that sort of stuff. I get it, but there's so much music around the world that it just feels like a shame that that a lot of it gets just missed, and so much incredible music around the world. And I think that's why I can speak for NTS, but it's like, I think we've never really, I mean, we kind of pride ourselves on mainly touch. I mean, you can listen to it and you can hear anything from Drake to, I don't know, Aphex Twin and NTS. But we pride ourselves on focusing on the music that doesn't really get played anywhere else, because we feel that a lot of the other stuff has been catered for. And there are, like I said, there are so many people around the world who have this interest but don't have the opportunities, don't have the outlets to be able to put that out, because if it's not seen to be something that generates humongous numbers that's being played everywhere else, no one really seems to be that interested. So we kind of pride ourselves in that, and that is our focus. And I actually feel, to your point earlier, I actually feel like the more radio stations out there that are doing that, the better. And on collaborating with them, it makes more sense as well.
Yeah, I mean, just to put it simply, like, having alternative spaces creates a space for innovation, right? Like, if everything was doing the same, broadcasting the same, speaking the same, we wouldn't have any change. You wouldn't have new genres coming. You wouldn't have newcomers coming. So I see them as catalysts for innovation, personally.
It's also the same for Radio Alara, isn't it? I mean, wanting to defy the algorithm. I've been listening to the radio, and it's the mix. It's mind blowing.
Yeah, basically the content of the radio is completely free and up to the producers to set, because the idea also is to bring in on the radio a panel or a sort of a section of the population that is as diverse as possible, regardless of the amount of listeners. The idea is to create this sort of, as Femi was mentioning earlier, the idea is to create encounters that were not really predictable or were not foreseen. The idea is to create encounters. So, for example, you're listening to a cooking show, and then you have a set of experimental music, and the guy that was listening to the cooking show wasn't exposed to experimental music, and in that way you create a sort of a diversity of cultures that actually enriches the whole project in a way that is sometimes very, very fruitful. And it creates that sort of richness of encounters that are really sometimes very beneficial.
Also, that diversity is also key for Radio Primavera Sound, and it's something that we try to work for, putting diverse people on the other side of the microphones, for instance.
Yeah. I was just going to say, also the algorithm, I mean, it always gets it wrong at some point. So it might get it right for 5-10 songs, but then there's always some song that how did this fit into the whole thing? And there's a human, it can't really compare to what, the human, humans obviously we're led by emotion, right? And so, someone's playing a song, it's, you can relate to it a lot better than, than the computer just selecting a track for you because it thinks you like this, and that. Mm-hmm. So, I also think that's why a lot more. I mean, I believe the reason why a lot more people engage better with radio and sit back and listen to radio for extended periods of time is because they can sort of relate to the sort of human emotion that is coming from the host who's putting out the music. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just
So we have less than 5 minutes left. I wanted to ask you both. about funding of your projects and also about challenges of the future. Since we do not have time, I kind of let you say whatever you want to end.
Yeah, I mean, for us, as I mentioned, we're not-for-profit. We received a grant at the beginning when we first had our idea from the Moleskine Foundation that funded our website and logo design, because one of the things that we want to do is make sure that when we commission people to do stuff, we can pay them as best as we can. At the moment, we rely quite a lot on Patreon and also kind of like one-off project grants. So, you know, we did a music production exchange workshop with a certain brand. We did some other stuff, but it definitely is a constant conversation. Like, okay, when's the next track coming? Like, how are we going to do it? But yeah, I think also this kind of like community element and things like platforms like Patreon and one-off donations, and also looking at things like merchandise and other income streams like ticketed events. These are all kind of ways that we're looking to fund ourselves. But yeah, the reason why we wanted to be not-for-profit is to try and, without sounding like a raging anti-capitalist, money corrupts, and we wanted to keep the essence of what the radio station was about as pure and not have like one like profit conversations as that.
Yusuf, Elias.
Basically, for us, the element of the radio that we're trying to preserve is its autonomy, and for us, maintaining the autonomy and independence, and open, have this platform where all the contributors have the possibility and the freedom to say whatever they want, and is very much linked to the way the radio is relates to its financial aspect. So we don't have money coming in, we don't have money coming out. And so basically the radio is totally run by the community and by the contribution. And on a daily basis, we are a team of 6 today that are managing the radio, and it's totally done on a voluntary basis. But we launched a different campaign of merchandising, and the merchandising was done in order to support charities across the world, whether in Palestine or in Lebanon or across the world. So wherever the financial aspect comes in, it's linked to third parties, and it's for charity essentially.
I mean, with us, one of the core ethoses of NTS has always been to give back to the communities. So we have various forms of funding. We work with partners, where most of the time our drive for partners is to pay artists and hosts, a lot more than they probably would get anywhere else. We also have a supporters model, which is more like a support NTS if you can. And then we also have merch. We have, some support from the Arts Council as well. Well, I think with everything that we do, our key thing is like a significant amount of money goes to our hosts and to musicians. But yeah, that's how we handle our funding.
Regarding RPS and End-to-End, we had a lot of support from sponsors of the festival. As you will see, if you attend to Primavera Sound Weekend 2 and you go and see our radio station there, studio, please come, because we're gonna do lots of interviews to artists from the lineup. Also, please don't miss the NTS Warehouse with live shows of Tartar Elena, Gaber Modus Operandi, Erika de Casier, Vladislav Delay, Courtesy Ambient, Ella Minus, and the DJ set of Machina Legend, DJ Pastis, among others. I'm afraid that it's all the time that we have. Thanks to our speakers, NTS Femia Deyemi, Oroko Radio's Kikelomo Oludem, Radio Alara's Elias and Yusuf Anastas. My name is Marta Salicru, Director of Radio Primavera Sound. Thanks for attending, and thanks everyone for following it through the radio streaming.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.